وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله صلى الله عليك يا ابن رسول الله روحي وأرواح العالمين لك الفداء يا غريب يا مظلوم يا شهيد في أرض كربلاء ثم السلام عليكم يا أهل رضا الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته صلوات
اللهم صل على
أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في كتاب الحكيم وهو أصدق الصادقين لقد كان في قصص عبرة لأولي الألباب ما كان حديثا يفترى ولكن تصديق الذي بين يديه وتفصيل كل شيء وهدى ورحمة لقوم يؤمنون. We have been reading this very beautiful verse from the Surah Yusuf. It's amazing the way the Quran, after relating the story, captures its essence. The Quran is not like the Old Testament. The Old Testament gives you the whole story. It cites a lot of details about which there's no certainty that they did happen that way, because it is based on the recollection of the rabbis. They collected materials after the temple was destroyed. So what they got in their hands was the minimum. If you look at the Old Testament, it's not minimum. It's maximum as far as the oral tradition goes. In Semitic culture, there was more oral transformation of important materials. People used to come together and they would hear the stories. They would hear the rabbis telling them, this is what happened, this is what happened. This is how Genesis happened, this is how David came in. All of these things that are part of the 5 books of the Old Testament are in detail that you and I, if we were to examine the historical sources, would be lost. By historical sources, I mean those sources that we can rely upon, saying that these were the accounts of people who saw these events. See, there's a difference between what you report as you have heard from others and what you report when you see the same event with your own eyes. When you see something, I don't mean to say that you inform objectively. It is subjective. It is the way you saw it, you are reporting it. And yet there is one important element, and that is you are an eyewitness reporter. You saw it, and you are telling us. Yes, it is your perspective, and yet we can all trust that this person was there. But when you talk about tradition, then there is one problem in the tradition. It is the way the story has been handed down generation to generation. What happens when the story is transmitted orally from generation to generation? People are not reading. It's not a reading culture, by the way. Semitic culture is oral culture. There were very few, for example, who could read and write even during the Prophet's time. The scribes who could read, by the way, even the Arabic letters, Arabic orthography was not well developed. Today, you and I, we read be, te, all of these in a different way. But in the old Arabic, it was all one shape. You had to know the language in order to read it. Now that creates a problem because you might misunderstand the original word, and therefore what you report is not reliable. See the delicacy of the historical materials. I want you to realize that when people say, I'm reading from the history, then you always ask, from whose perspective are you reading? Is it your perspective? Is it your group's perspective? Is it your school's perspective? After many years, the history of Virginia was revisited by Jeffersonian scholars, because it was stored in a certain way. And Jefferson scholars were hiding so many other details that were actually stunningly against Mr. Jefferson. For example, his household made up of the slaves, his relation to the slave women, all of these were hidden. They were not mentioned by all histories. I remember when I joined University of Virginia in 1970s, there was the time they were revisiting Jefferson's history, and they were saying, no, this could not be true. They're hiding something about Mr. Jefferson. Mr. Jefferson was not the ideal American that you and I make it out of him. And human beings are human beings. There are shortcomings in human beings. When we say we are claiming to be the followers of so-and-so, that means we still deserve to be guided. If we knew everything and we are guided the way we should be guided, then there is no need for further prophets to come, for further books to come. But the Quran says that we have come to tell you what happened in the past. And we are telling you the truth, what happened in the past. We're not giving you hearsay of the stories. We're giving the real stories of what happened. When you look at what the narratives are doing, then there are three things that become clear. The first question, when I'm going to relate a story to you, and it should automatically come to your mind that whose version is the professor telling us? Who is the reporter? Whose story is he relying on? And whose story he is rejecting outright? Because there are 3, 4, 5 versions of the story. I'll tell you about Karbala. There are about 20 versions of Karbala stories. Yes, 20 different stories. So when you hear about Karbala, you often ask in your heart, whose version is the professor citing? Who do you think does he rely on? Because I have to be very careful in relating to you. You are trusting my judgment, correct? If I don't do my homework and come to you and throw at you one of the versions, and you might find it completely illogical, irrational. You will say, where did he get it from? And this story, I don't understand. Why is Zainab mentioned as coming out of the tent when Ali Akbar is falling? In the other version, she is not mentioned. 2 versions. When Ali Akbar falls in the battlefield, and immediately when he calls upon Imam Hussein, according to one version, there was a woman, she came out of the tent, and she was running towards the field where the battle took place. That means Zainab Salamullah alayha left her place in the tent and she came out, even before Imam Hussein could come. You see the implications. Imam Hussein was already there because Imam Hussein he heard the voice, he heard the call of his son. Alayka minni salam ya Aba Abdullah. My last greetings to you. And What we are reading now, Sheikh Mufid says, the woman came out. She was the one who went, and she was the one who heard. And what they are trying to show is this. The baby Zainab was emotionally, for example, connected to Ali. For surely she was. But the leper was brought up by her, according to all historical narratives. She brought them up like her own children. On the other hand, she broke the rule. Astaghfirullah Rabbi wa atubu. Imam Hussein had told them all, sit here, don't move. You will not move from this place in the tent. You will stay here. Therefore, the question arises, did she disobey the Imam? See the two versions? How delicate they become. Now, I'm talking about the possible ethics of narrative. We are going to use the narrative in order to learn from the narrative what we are required to be morally. Everything in the narrative of Karbala is teaching us something. And that something is not ordinary. It is showing us the moral path of the future. Why would we read something in the past if it has no implication for now? Anything that you are reading in the past has two goals in mind. Either you want to verify what was written about the past is reliable. You compare 3-4 versions, you say this is reliable. I like this, what this is telling about the Old Testament, this is more correct. If you are a scholar, but you're ordinary participant, you have no way of knowing what is reliable, what is not reliable. And we know the goal is to provide a close reading of exemplary narrative. Ethics will not emerge until the narrative attains certainty of its reporting. You can't talk about something that you've heard. Oh, I have heard so-and-so telling me. No. We want you to tell us what source you are using. The philosophers, for example, in the University of Chicago were very clear about narrative ethics. There was debate going on. Why don't we start teaching people ethics by teaching the principles first? Let us teach them, for example, that compassionate behavior is far more acceptable than the cruel behavior. As a principle of ethics, if I want to deal with you, I better deal with you with compassion. And I'm being told cruelty is not good. You will be punished by God by being so cruel. Okay, that's the principle. You start from a principle and then you learn about it and you apply in your everyday situation. Your son comes home and says, I failed this course. Your first question to your son is that, did you study for it? Yes, Dad, I studied for it. Did you have a study guide for this? Yes, we had a study guide. Then there is no reason for you to fail. All the logical pieces are coming together to tell you that the narrative is correct, that he has failed. Why he has failed is not because there was no information given. There was no system provided. There was no study guide provided for him. The reason is that he was careless. And you want to hold him responsible for failing the course. On the other hand, there's a different version that your son is providing when he saw you for the first time when he got his result. When he scored an F in that course, He had told you something very different, that I was psychologically very much damaged at that time. I was worried about this and that, and I did not study enough, and I was awake at night, and therefore when I went to exam, I could not do it. I failed it. Two versions. How would you as parent make it out which one is correct now that the same person is giving you two versions? University of Chicago professors of ethics were saying that we want to analyze American society. American society, their minds are closed. Why? Ellen Bloom came out with a book, by the way, worth reading even now, Closing of American Minds. It's a good analysis of American youths. What are they studying? And why are they not performing so well in the world global affairs? Why are they so limited in the way they approach? Do they read Plato, Aristotle, Socrates? Do they read the dialogue? Do they study philosophy? Do they study anthropology, sociology, all of these things, by the way? This is University of Chicago. It's an Ivy League school. It's a hub of all intellectualism, especially dealing with ethics. There are 3 or 4 people there doing work in ethics. Martha Nussbaum, one of the famous professors of ethics, believed that in order for us to provide moral information to our youths, we need to do a lot of research to make sure that we're giving them authentic stories. If we don't do that, they'll be misled to believe something very, very different about themselves. She was challenging Ellen Bloom that no, we need to find out, first of all, which narrative is exemplary. Because we want to teach the young people examples. If we don't provide them examples, they will not learn. Young people need examples. The whole debate was, if we give narratives that are not exemplary, let's say we use Hitler to give an example of the way a war can be waged in terms of racism, Aryanism versus, against non-Aryanism. That's what they did. Nazis created a kind of ideology that regarded the Jews as Semites being, as if they were nothing. They were below humanity. Ultimately, the question was resolved by people like Said Hussein Nasr and some others. So I said, look, wait a minute, we need to be careful about it. All moral knowledge, according to this Muslim, Christian, Jewish scholars, is all knowledge is based upon a story of one's own social group. Our social group, my social group are you. So all the stories that I'm going to tell you is going to be in accordance with you and I being comfortable with it. I cannot bring up a story here that we are not comfortable with. We're talking about narrative ethics. My argument in the last 2 lectures has been that Karbala is going to stand out as a future model of moral behavior. Karbala cannot be expected to be anything other than that. If the Prophet's idea of Islam was to teach people how to become morally excellent, then what Imam Hussain fought for in Karbala, why he came to Karbala, he did go through the suffering, his family, all of them. There was only one reason for it. We are going to save the moral principles taught by the Prophet. You can see where it led. Even Sachedina, this small girl, they say she was 5 years old, 6 years old, whatever she was, or whatever is reported about her and the way she talked to her father, it was very clear that even she understood that my father would not do the bay'ah. She never comes and tells her father that, why don't you do the bay'ah? At least we'll get the water, we'll be comfortable. No, not a single time. I'm telling you, none of the members in Imam Hussein's group ever told Imam Hussein alayhi salam that, why don't you just go ahead? You do the bay'ah. I will be at least saved from this disaster. I'm telling you, it is very, very important for you and me to understand that Karbala has happened at a time. How many years have passed since the Prophet's wafat? 11 Hijrah, this is 61. What, 50 years now. Within 50 years, Islam was going through such a crisis that only a few could understand it. And here we understand that why the exemplary literary texts are important for you and me to understand. We cannot depend upon what people say. Ravi said so and so. Ravi said, well, let's find out who the Ravi is. We really want to understand. We want to rely on these stories. The traditional emphasis is on moral principles. And theory should be discarded in favor of the focus that the narrative provides. The focus that Karbala narrative provides. Karbala is a paradigm. It's an example where every piece of information about Karbala is going to prick you and will ask you, did you understand me? I'm saying this, did you understand me? Each speech of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, from the time he leaves Medina, Makkah, and enters Karbala, all of his speeches are trying to remind us there is something larger that Imam Hussein is responsible for. It's not an ordinary thing. It's not my grandfather's religion is in danger. It is human morals are in danger. You and I know today that which threatens our society is the immorality around us. We are not able to talk about moral obligations. You come to the university where there is an expectation that this is a free space and therefore there will be open discussions. But if you try to do that, by the way, in the university classes, immediately a student is reporting that the professor is preaching to us, but they can't take it. In other words, there is a dislike of being told that you are wrong. You shouldn't be doing this, you should be doing this. In other words, we are left with something that the Quran wants us to study very carefully. I have mentioned to you. Now I make my thesis clearer so that you all understand where I'm coming from. My thesis is the best way to read the Quran is to pay attention to the ways in which the book of God provides decrees, ahkam, and models for what? For developing a Muslim personality of excellence. Have I summed it up well? Once again, I say, this is the thesis. You want to read the Quran? We read the Quran ritually, by the way. All the majalises, wherever you go, they have Quran recitation at the beginning, and then you have, the lectures. But there's no connection between the Quran recitation and the lecture. In most of the cases that I have been, I don't know many more. In other words, the Quran is treated the way Muawiyah was treating the Quran. Ritually. You can put the Quran on the lenses and fight against Imam Ali. Can you imagine the kind of ridiculous idea that Muawiyah is bringing up? And through the advice that he gets from his commanders, especially Amr ibn al-As, this is what you need to do. Now, I don't know, historians have told us, we don't know if there were many copies of the Quran, but certainly there were leaves of the Quran, big pages of the Quran. The whole Quran was not available like this. And the Quran is being brought in front of someone who is totally in existence, the Quran itself. Ali ibn Abi Talib is no ordinary person. Enemies or friends, they all know and they all acknowledge that Ali was the Quran and the Quran was Ali. And the Prophet knew it. That if there is only one person whom I have trained as my student, thoroughly the way I should have trained, then this is Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ali is the one. According to Muhammad Baqir Sadr, Ayatollah Muhammad Baqir Sadr, who ibn al-Quran. As if the Quran had, an offspring. And the Quran is, Ali is the offspring of the Quran. That means the offspring of the Quran has all the DNA of the Quran. What the Quran is trying to teach is there in Ali's personality. What we have come to understand, by the way, is that if this thesis is correct, that the Quran should be read for developing the models of the human perfection, then religion and ethics are completely together. Not the way today the secular ethicists are telling us. Secular ethicists are telling us that ethics has nothing to do with religion. It's human reason, human experience that teaches you to be ethical. So what Bible says, what New Testament says, love thy neighbor as you love thyself, is something that the secular language has developed much earlier than the Revelation did. The Quran is challenging that if you know better, then you bring up this, you tell us, why are you so cruel in treating your daughters? Why are you doing that? If you are so good, if you don't need to learn from the revelation, why would revelation come to you? Why wouldn't it come to someone else? Well, the Quran is very clear that this Quran has come to you so that it can guide you. How can it guide you? Some darkness needs to be defeated immediately. Jahiliyyah was a darkness. That period was dark because it was doing so many things extremely bad that someone had to come and put a stop to it. Revolutions took place when all the norms of the history are destroyed by those who are in power. Powerful people. Powerful, politically, powerful, socially. They are the ones who want everything to be dictated according to what they believe in. What the Prophet ﷺ, as I said in last night's lecture, that for such a long time, the Meccans opposed the Prophet, and their opposition to the Prophet was because of only one thing. The Prophet was teaching tazakki. The Prophet was teaching moral excellence based on a different understanding, not on blood relationship. Because I happen to be your cousin, I happen to be your, descendant. That's why, because the Arabs used to pride about it, even now they do, for example. Banu Tihama, Quraysh, Fulan, they take pride in that. And the Prophet came and said, no, your pride has to be based on your khulq. What you can show. in your behavior. So Tazakki came, and one of the signs of objective signs of Tazakki was to help those who were less fortunate. So tahhirukum bi amwalikum. Amwal, where the zakat, the donation that you give. Many of us hesitate to give donations, sometimes even for Islamic centers. But remember one thing, a most important key for giving donation is to look at the ultimate goal of the institution. The goal of the institution is to make people morally upright, to help them to become better than what they are. So when you look at what I think the paradigm is showing is, I think the ayah is very clear that لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصٍ إِبْرَةٌ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. And إِبْرَةٌ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ is the unfolding of the example. Ibra is your ability to move from unknown to known. Ta'aleem. You don't know one thing, through your syllogistic understanding, you can know that which you don't know, because you know something already, which is part of the minimum that you require to know the other. The Quran is very clear that in these stories, we are not trying to entertain you. We are trying to tell you that human beings are in need of the guidance. But the guidance will come only through the living examples. If there are no living examples, human beings will not follow anything. I'm quite clear in these lectures that if the religious leaders don't show the leadership by setting an example themselves, they will be defeated very quickly. There is no way that they can really get across. How many people are preaching about so many things of Muharram? And you and I know very well that when you open those programs, there were times when you opened 9 television, stations, and you listen to them and you realize that nobody's doing what they're supposed to do. What are they supposed to do? They are supposed to bring about what we call Ibratun li'ulil albab. Those who are able to think, those who are able to do these things, they are able to do that, to follow those examples. I think that one of the most perhaps challenging aspect of the Muharram gatherings is that how to keep the momentum among men and women who attend these lectures, who attend these gatherings, how to keep up the momentum to follow the example through. I'll give you one narrative, by the way. And that narrative is, when I was a student in Mashhad, I want you to understand that this is not about me. I'm simply mentioning it so that maybe it can open some better understanding of your own situation here. There was an orphanage just across from the Haram. In the old days. There were no big hotels, no big buildings. It was still, bazaar was around there. And I still remember that we used to go early in the morning. And it was the birthday of Hazrat Fatima Salaamullah alayha on 20th of Jamaat al-Akhir. And we decided to go to the Haram, and after the Haram we said, let's go and visit the orphanage. So we bought some sweets and we brought with us those sweets in that orphanage. When we went to the orphanage, we found little children. I want you to hear all these children who grow up here, how much we complain about food, about breakfast and everything. Here was, an example of the children with black cup of tea and a dry biscuit. I don't know what they call it in Farsi. It was a dry biscuit that you put in eat, and that was the breakfast. The moment we entered the orphanage, the children surrounded us. They touched us. They wanted to be kissed by us. They wanted to be embraced by us. And we both were overwhelmed, I would say, when we saw the children so hungry of being, kissed by people, loved by people. So I talked to Mr. Bazargan, who was another Bazargan in my head. I said, what are they doing? What are these children do? What do they do? He said, we have very minimum budget for them. And they are studying here. We teach them, we prepare them for vocational schools so that tomorrow they become independent. They work. Why is the condition I see their beds are not very clean, the clothes they are wearing is why so much poverty? The reason he gave me was that there are people who come, they want to feed them with shirini, with sweets, but they don't want to take important steps of providing them with more resources. They come with small, like we did. We just bought, some sweets and we said, okay, we are doing something very good. We bring them, sweets for the Hazrat Fatima's wiladat. Was that sufficient? That was the question for us then. Did we do what we were supposed to do? And immediately it struck to me and my wife that we need to come here every week to see these children. But not see them only, but teach them. We didn't know anything else except English. So we could teach them English. And you won't believe within 6 months that we were going there, these children learned English. Because we were both teaching them. Our joy was to see them, enjoying our companionship there. And the thing that they would never have expected, they're coming from different countries. And Khariji was something, I'm talking about 60s and 70s. Somebody coming from outside speaking English, there was something in Iran at that time and people were not knowing English that much. The second language was French. I'm talking about those days. This thing that emerged out of that meeting was the scholarship for the children to attend good vocational schools in Iran itself. There was one school in Taqiyabad. The older children could go there in the technological institute. I'm asking a very simple question. Where does our responsibility lie? As outsiders, as coming from outside, well fed, well taken care of. Is it sufficient for us to feel sympathy and bring shirini for them? Is that, criticism correct? Are we not supposed to do that? And I think this is the time, by the way, that Imam Hussein is asking us to give the account. You remember I told you the Ayatollah Ibrahim Amini in his book, Dal-Gustar-e-Jahan, the just ruler of the world, he said, on the day when Imam comes back, he's going to ask us, when Imam Sahib Zaman will come, he'll ask us, what did you do to the memory of my grandfather? Did you only do only this? Did you only cry? What did you do? In other words, he is expecting us to rise and to stand for the values Imam Hussein taught us. Imam Hussein's every child taught us a value. And I'm going to remember 2 children, by the way, who are not with Imam Hussein, but they were with Muslim bin Aqil, or they came after, or they came, their history is very much in doubt. What exactly happened? We know them as Tiflana Muslim. And there's a haram up there in Mosul, in Iraq. We used to go and visit that, we used to feel very sorry that the 2 children were killed. My dear children, this is a story for you. That these were the children, maybe 11, 12 years old each, or maybe 12, 13, we don't know. But they were arrested in a very dire condition. When they were arrested, they were pushed, they were pulled and brought, to be slaughtered on the river bank. They were Muhammad and Ibrahim. And Muhammad and Ibrahim told their, jailer that, we have a final request from you. Look at what the children are doing. So we want to pray 2 rakat salat. These children did not ask for anything. They did not ask for food or for anything. We need only an opportunity to pray to our Lord. And these children, they prayed for the last time. And after they finished the prayer, they were beheaded by the enemy. We don't even know. Who knew about that? There are so many variations of this narrative that when you look at it, you get surprised that they could not preserve anything that is reliable for us to follow. But one thing is sure, that the 2 children stood by the teachings of their family members. They were committed to it, and they were killed. Not only that, after being killed, their bodies were thrown in the river. How did they end up today with that? In that haram, we have no idea. Nobody knows about it. But we know that they are buried there. Brothers and sisters, it's very hard for us to understand the situation in which the events of Karbala came together. I'm almost towards the end, and I want to cover just a little bit of ground. That the 2 children of Hazrat Muslim were so cruelly treated by the enemy. In the world history, whenever I teach Islam and human rights, I say, which culture in the world will say it is okay to punish children? Which culture in the world can say it is okay to show cruelty to children? I have always got the answer from my students, whatever they believed in, that no way should a cruelty to children be accepted. Ever. And here we find, imagine these Muslims, these were the people who were saying we are Muslims. These were the people who were saying that we are, we are doing the salah, we are doing all these things. And they were the ones who were committing all these horrendous acts. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, it's very important for us to remember that Muharram is a time to challenge our wrong beliefs and to polish ourselves, to clean ourselves as we hear these, anecdotes, these narratives, which are opening for us a new vista of morality. Something that we don't talk about. We talk about ahkam al-sharia. We talk about what the Sharia wants from us, but something that the Sharia wants from us from the very beginning is our commitment to justice. There is no Sharia without justice. But imagine how many times you see and I see how many cases right in front of our eyes that justice is not followed at all. Rather, we find that justice is just ignored. And this is what is bothering us. Orientalists told us for many, many times that Muslims are not ethically inspired by Islam. Now, what do you mean? Well, they don't have books on ethics. What they have on books on ethics is from Aristotle's ethics. That's what they say. There's so many things they say about us. Oh, we have accepted it. So many of us who study in the university have accepted it blindly. Yes, this Orientalist has done this kind of research. Therefore, what he says is right. No, what he says is not right. Especially if I follow my yesterday's argument that the Quran came to teach us tazakki. It came to teach us how to become morally excellent. And becoming morally excellent means to be questioning your own behavior. We all are open to reform. The moment we say, no, I'm doing everything well. No, you're not doing everything well. This is why I say the past is not accessible to you if you don't deny certain things about yourself. I'm asking you this very plain question. Did Karbala happen? Did Karbala happen? You would say, if it had not happened, we would not have been here. That's why we say Karbala. But so, what has Karbala to do with you today? If this question is asked, what will we say? Will we say that we would not have learned our rituals well? What would we say? One answer that is missing today in the Muslim community, and I tell even my Sunni brothers and sisters that you are missing out on something very important. This is the question of sacred time, sacred narrative. The secularists are telling us there is no sacred narrative. There's only worldly narrative. And therefore, you need to be concerned about the way in which we progress. And I'm saying quite clearly that Imam Hussain alayhi salam showed us the moment of sacred moment. And the sacred moment came at all times in his movement to Karbala. Brothers and sisters, there was no more difficult time for Imam Hussain alayhi salam than the bid farewell, to hold and to others, especially one of his black slaves. There was a black slave by the name of John. You and I, we don't even concern ourselves. We are so much color blinded. In some ways, we're only white. That's the way we are. In this culture, if you are not aware, if you don't keep your moral torches properly in light, then you will forget that there are other colors existing here. John was a black man from Africa, from Ethiopia. And he was the servant of Abu Dhar Ghaffari. And from when Abu Dhar was killed, he came to the house of Imam Hassan. Then he came to the house of Imam Hussain. And he came finally with Imam Hussain. He followed him to Karbala. John, on the day of Ashura, comes to Imam Hussain and says, Mullah, I must go and give my life for the cause that you have done. So John, you don't have to do that. You served our family in most difficult circumstances. You were with us, you did the khidmah for us, you did the service for us. You don't have to do that. And no more. Don't I deserve to be a martyr? Of course you do. And Imam Hussain brings John and comes and gives him the horse. John comes and fights. And as was usual for the enemies, they would all surround and finally get rid of the person who came to fight them. But John fell. And he was killed. When he was killed, he called out Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Salam alayka ya Abdul. And Imam Hussain came running with Abul Fazl al-Abbas. Abbas, they must take him to the tent of the Shuhada. There were two places Imam Hussain had created in front of his tents. And one side there were family members so that the women could come and visit them. And other side there were the ashab of Imam Hussain. They were the friends of Imam Hussain. And John was there. But before Imam Hussain and Abul Fazl Abbas carry John back to the tent, Imam Hussain puts his cheek on the cheek of John. Said, John, you have brightened. You become bright. And Imam Hussain is praying, Ya Allah, this John was the most faithful that I had. Imagine if you want to get the dua of Imam Hussain. Who doesn't want to get the dua of Imam Hussain? We all want to get the dua of Imam Hussain, don't we? Does it didn't come to your mind that when you say Assalamu alaikum ya Abdullah, at least once Imam Hussain should say Alayka salam ya Habibi. Don't you feel that? That you want to hear Imam Hussain greeting you back? Yes, Imam Hussain will greet you the way he greeted John and the way he believed in John. Imam Hussain will always say Labbaik, Alayka minni salam, ya Habibi, ya Mahibbi, all those who love me, to you also my salam. And this is what I think we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that may Allah give us that felicity, that Imam Hussain also prays for us. It's a time to make the dua, my friend. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amman yujibul mustarra idha da'a wa yakshifu as-su'. Amman yujibul mustarra idha da'a wa yakshifu as-su'. All together, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Amman yujibul mustarra idha da'a wa yakshifu as-su'. Amman yujibul mustarra idha da'a wa yakshifu. أمن يجيب المضطر ويكشف السوء إلهي بحق ناجاك من نجاك يا الله واغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات واشف مرضانا وافسح أمورنا في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم صل على محمد.